Before steel-crowned kings or cathedrals kissed the sky, there was something older, something born from fire, earth, and human will. The story of how hands shaped history itself. Before there were kings, before there was writing or bronze, there were hands shaping the first memories of humanity, crafts. In the medieval world, those ancient arts still breathed. In the glow of the kiln, the ring of the forge, and the loom whispering through the night, among hundreds of trades, one question endures. Which craft truly began it all? The oldest thread that runs from survival in prehistory to the artistry of the Middle Ages. Before kingdoms rose, crafts were not professions. They were survival itself. A chipped stone was more than a tool. It was proof that the human mind could change the shape of nature. When sparks leapt from flint to dry grass, fire became both a weapon and a companion. From spinning wild fibers into thread to shaping wet clay into bowls, early humans learned that their hands could build a world gentler than the wilderness around them. The Middle Ages inherited these ancient instincts. A blacksmith's forge was the echo of prehistoric fires. A potter's wheel was the evolution of an old trembling motion, a hand turning, steadying, forming. Every hammer strike, every woven strand, every carved beam of wood was a continuation of an ancient dialogue between mankind and matter. In the medieval village, craftsmanship wasn't a luxury. It was the pulse of daily existence. The craftsman didn't only make, he preserved. Each skill passed from father to son, mother to daughter across centuries without a written word. These anonymous makers carried the memory of survival in their callous palms. Their work was not art for admiration. It was art for endurance. And within that endurance lies something timeless, the first kind of wisdom humanity ever created, to shape the world with care and leave behind a trace of warmth in the coldness of nature. Pottery is the oldest surviving craft, born from earth and fire more than 10,000 years before Christ. In medieval times, from Japan's kilns to Persian deserts to English villages, potters repeated gestures unchanged by millennia. Wet clay, turning wheel, patient flame. Every vessel told a story of endurance. The clay remembered fingerprints, heat, and time. It was the first material that could both hold food and memory. In medieval monasteries, clay became sacred. Monks shaped chalices and lamps to light the word of God. In markets, humble pots carried grains, oil, and milk, the silent rhythm of life. Even urns for the dead were made from the same soil that fed the living. Unlike gold or iron, pottery was democratic. It belonged to everyone, from peasants baking bread to queens drinking wine. All touched clay. In its simplicity lay eternity. The medieval potter, kneeling beside his wheel, embodied a ritual older than religion. He gathered earth, mixed it with water, gave it form, and surrendered it to fire. Creation, destruction, and rebirth, all within a single kiln. Through pottery, humanity first understood transformation, how fragile matter could be reborn in flame. And perhaps that is why the oldest craft still survives. Because it teaches what civilization itself had to learn, that permanence begins with something that can break. When humanity first discovered iron, it was as if the earth had revealed a hidden pulse beneath its skin. The blacksmith became the interpreter of that heartbeat, a master of flame and patience. In the Middle Ages, the forge was both workshop and altar. Inside its smoke and fire, metal learned obedience. The smith's hammer rang like a hymn, each strike transforming raw or into purpose, a plow, a horseshoe, a sword. To the villagers, he was not merely a craftsman, but a keeper of power. He tamed fire, commanded iron, and shaped tools that determined survival in war. Myths painted him as half divine. Vulcan in Rome, Wayland in England, Ilmarinen in Finland, all symbols of the same truth. The blacksmith stood between man and God, matter and magic. A medieval blacksmith understood balance. Too much heat and the metal shattered. Too little, and it remained stubborn as stone. In that fragile line between control and chaos, he found mastery, a reflection of life itself. His creations outlived him. The iron nails in cathedral doors, the hinges of drawbridges, the armor that bore kings, all whispered his legacy. He forged not just metal, but the rhythm of civilization, one spark at a time. Before words could tell stories, threads already did. Weaving is older than writing, a language of pattern and patience. In medieval Europe, the loom was the heart of the home. Women sat before its wooden frame, turning wool, flax, or silk into the fabric of survival. Cloth meant shelter, warmth, and dignity. A family's status could be read in the fineness of its weave. From the bustling workshops of Flanders to the silken alleys of Damascus, from Venice's dye vats to China's Song-era looms, textile craft became the backbone of global trade. Entire cities thrived on the hum of spinning wheels. Yet weaving was more than commerce. It was meditation, each thread crossing another like breath meeting breath. Every pattern symbolized fate. The warp and weft intertwined like destiny and choice. To the medieval weaver, the loom was sacred space. The rhythmic clatter of wood and thread echoed prayers. In monasteries, monks wove habits for service. In homes, mothers wove hope for their children's winters. Through weaving, humanity connected the physical and the spiritual, turning raw nature into meaning. And in every piece of cloth from the Middle Ages, if one listens closely, one can still hear the quiet song of hands weaving the story of life itself. Before stone shaped cathedrals or wood-shaped homes, it was the first material mankind trusted. Soft enough to carve, strong enough to build. In the Middle Ages, wood was everywhere. The frame of the cottage, the ribs of the ship, the altar of the church. A medieval carpenter was both architect and storyteller. His chisels and mallets translated the forest into form. Every beam he joined carried a whisper of the tree it once was, still alive in the scent of sap, still breathing beneath the grain. They built bridges over rivers, bell towers over villages, and ships that carried faith and fear across oceans. Their craft held civilization together, literally. When a carpenter raised a roof, he wasn't only giving shelter, he was giving shape to human endurance. Christian tradition gave the trade sacred meaning. Jesus himself had been a carpenter. To work with wood was to imitate creation, to take what grew from the earth and guide it toward heaven. Unlike stone, wood decayed, but that impermanence was its truth. It reminded medieval builders that nothing human lasts, and that perhaps was why they built with such care. In every joint and carving lay humility, the knowledge that to build is to borrow from time. Before cities, before markets, there was bread, grinding grain, mixing water, waiting for fire. These were the first rituals of civilization. By the Middle Ages, baking had become not just a necessity, but a calling, protected by guilds and blessed by religion. The baker rose before dawn, guided by the rhythm of the oven. He turned simple ingredients, flour, salt, yeast, into the miracle of sustenance. In every village, the bakery was both workshop and sanctuary. The smell of bread meant safety, community, and divine mercy. In Christian faith, bread symbolized life itself. "Give us this day our daily bread" was both a prayer and a truth. That nourishment was sacred. During famine, bread riots were not acts of rebellion, but cries for dignity. When a loaf burned or failed to rise, it felt like nature itself had turned away. Cooking and baking were the most human crafts. They transformed the raw into the comforting, the dangerous into the edible. Over time, recipes became oral maps of memory, guiding hands through centuries. To make bread was to repeat an ancient promise, that life, no matter how fragile, could always begin again in the warmth of an oven. Long before names were written, symbols were carved. From the first scratches on bone to the sacred sculptures of medieval churches, carving transformed labor into prayer. The craftsman's knife did not simply cut, it revealed. In the Middle Ages, stone carvers and wood sculptors carried out acts of devotion. Their hands gave shape to angels, saints, and demons, each face born from faith and fatigue. They worked in silence, often anonymous, their signatures hidden beneath centuries of dust. Yet their work spoke louder than their names ever could. Every figure on a cathedral portal, every leaf curling along a wooden choir stall was an echo of belief. The invisible turned visible. Through carving, artisans translated theology into texture, allowing the illiterate to read scripture with their eyes. Medieval carving was not just decoration. It was salvation made tangible. To carve was to participate in divine creation, to release form from matter. A chisel strike was both destruction and birth. Even today, when one looks closely at those weathered statues, one can still sense the pulse of the hands that made them, trembling, devoted, human. The art was sacred not because it was perfect, but because it remembered the imperfection of those who created it. From the dust of carpentry and stone carving rose the mightiest of medieval achievements, construction. Building was where every craft met. The mason's precision, the carpenter's strength, the blacksmith's iron, the potter's tiles, the weaver's ropes. Together, they built eternity out of labor. Gothic cathedrals stretched upward like prayers turned solid. Castles rose from mud into monuments. Bridges stitched continents together. Each block of stone was lifted not by machines, but by conviction, faith that human hands could reach heaven. To build in the Middle Ages was to confront time itself. The work took decades, sometimes lifetimes. Builders often died before their creations were finished, but they built anyway, knowing that what they began might outlive empires. The construction guilds guarded secrets of geometry and proportion, blending mysticism with mathematics. For them, building was not merely engineering. It was an act of worship. Every arch, every column was a gesture toward eternity. And so, through the dust and sweat of their labor, medieval builders achieved what few could. They made faith visible, and time itself trembled before their endurance. Their cathedrals still stand, not just as monuments of stone, but as confessions of human hope carved into the bones of the earth. Across continents and centuries, three crafts refused to die: pottery, weaving, and blacksmithing. They survived empires, wars, plagues, and the slow forgetting of time. Each belongs to an element: clay to earth, weaving to air, smithing to fire. Together, they form the trinity of human endurance. Wherever civilization rose, these crafts followed, from the river valleys of Mesopotamia to the markets of medieval Europe. The potter molded memory from mud. The weaver spun breath into cloth. The blacksmith forged wool into metal. Though their tools changed, their rituals remained the same: repetitive, humble, eternal. In medieval towns, these crafts defined identity. Guild symbols marked the doors of workshops: the anvil, the wheel, the spindle. They were not just professions. They were heritages passed through generations like sacred vows. No matter how powerful kings became, they still ate from clay, wore cloth, and trusted iron. These crafts were the quiet foundation beneath every throne. Even today, in a world of machines, we return to them instinctively, to shape, to weave, to forge, as if the old instincts still hum beneath our skin. Perhaps because they remind us who we are, creatures who survive not by conquering nature, but by collaborating with it. The oldest craft is not buried in ruins. It lives in the hands that make from clay, fiber, and flame. Humanity built not only tools, but tenderness. Medieval craftsmen did not invent creation.